Was it an Intel failure where we lost 28 people? Is it for us to do politics right now or actually find reasons so that we avert such attacks in the future? Joining me to talk about whether or not it was an Intel failure without really getting into the politics of it is Major Amit Bansal, retired defense strategy expert. I shall also be joined by another expert, Dr. Abhinav Pandya, terrorism and radicalization expert, in a bit. Major Bansal, welcome. It's a very, very sad day, of course. Major Bansal, like I said, without, I don't want to do politics over dead bodies, and I pretty much, men in uniform never ever do that. But since Pulwama, this is one of the biggest, deadliest, dastardly attacks. Look at the way it's been orchestrated. Do you think that this could have been possible unless there were chinks in the armor of Intel, Major Bansal?
Sudha, when I talk about intelligence failure,
Yes,
we
sir.
see the entire history of Jammu and Kashmir and all the attacks. Tourists have never been attacked in such a manner ever, even when the terrorism was at its peak. When you're talking about the intelligence, you have to talk about the topography, you have to talk about the area, you have to talk about the possible threat perception. So this was a case where nobody could ever imagine that terrorists could launch an attack on the tourists. Second is the area. Pahalgam has been a relatively peaceful area where there has not been any terror incident in past several decades. There was no active terrorist group in this area for several decades. So when you talk about these factors, of course, your requirement for intelligence from this area becomes quite less. Second factor is that when you're talking about various sources of intelligence, we have got electronic means, we have got human intelligence. So area again, once again, it was devoid of all the villages. It was totally barren hills. No people were staying in these areas. So getting human intelligence also becomes difficult.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, sorry,
yes.
Major Bansal, go
So
ahead,
let
sir.
me complete. So when you're talking about the threat perception, the three point I talk about: threat perception, the past history of the terror incidents, and the roadblocks in obtaining human intelligence as well as the electronic intelligence due to the
Right.
forest
Okay.
or own. So it
Major
is quite
Bansal,
difficult to get an intelligence in this
but
area.
apparently the terrorists were apparently doing recce. They're wrecking the place, a couple of weeks back. The intel agencies knew about it. Could it be? Could it be? Because you've listed out peaceful for decades, no act was, ever performed there. Could it be that it's an intelligence failure because no one acted on these hints? Let's not forget Kargil, sir. I mean, intelligence is supposed to be super alert. They are supposed to be almost like, anything suspicious beyond super suspicious. How come a recce was done and the intel agencies did not warn people that this is quite possible, Major Bansal?
I'm with you, but when you're talking about the area, it's got such a huge footfall of the tourists that who's coming, who's not coming. There are a lot of people from rest of the Kashmir who are coming here in the search of jobs as a guide or as a pony operators. So it is very difficult to segregate a person who's coming from any other area to be a potential guy carrying out a recce or a terrorist or a guy who's just come in search of a job. So again, when I'm talking about this, I'm not denying, yes, there has been some kind of failure, there have been some kind of ignorance on the part of the intelligence agencies, but you cannot blame totally on them for the intelligence failure because of the various factors which I listed out. Yes, there has been ignorance, there has been factors which could have been avoided. Yes, agencies could have been more alert had they got any kind of heads off in the past. They got to know later on that recce was carried out post incident, but prior to that, they had no idea that recce was carried out. Had they knew about it, so things would have been different by now.
No,
Have faith in the Indian forces; they are capable of handling the
of course,
situation with
there are no
intelligence.
doubts about it, but then we also cannot forget that 28 people are dead. I mean, any terror attack, there are human lives lost and there is trauma for life. It is something that, you see, it's about trust, Major Bansal. I trust
Yes,
you
again,
because you are one of us. You save us, you protect me, you see that I'm secure. Somewhere that trust also shifts because apparently IB and RAW, they were working. They were working non-stop like it's their job to do. They did gather inputs about militant movement, in Pahalgam. The system was working indeed, but what about the execution? I mean, action fell short. Please, I'm not trying to apportion blame, Major Bansal, But today, I am on the side of that woman who fell on the coffin of her husband, cried her heart out, and in the end said, Jai Hind. We are answerable to her, Major Bansal, or to several other people whose they've lost their husband. The children are traumatized for life, Major Bansal. Raw and IB picked up some suspicious activity. They knew, but apparently, is it possible, Major Bansal, that we know, but we did not act upon it?
No, ma'am, it is not possible. Had we know about it, we would have acted definitely. I know I've got a long experience of serving in Kashmir. I have been in touch with all the people on the ground. Had security agencies got a tip of that, yes, such kind of things is even possible, like even a slightest of hint would have been given to them, things would have been different by now. They have been able to save Kashmir in the past also. And post abrogation of Article 317 2019, you see the way things were returning to the normalcy. But yes, in past 2 years, as the influx of the terrorists from the outside, from the Pakistan has been more, things are becoming a little difficult. But the more and more we are emphasizing that, I would like to emphasize on the point that no, nowhere in the past the tourists were attacked. It has never
Right.
happened in the past.
Right.
There's not been the trend of the terrorism. So nobody could ever imagine that they could even attack the tourists.
No, but I've seen civilians, I mean, I'm sorry, but civilians could be attacked. The point is, Kashmir is a very sensitive area. It's a terrain which, gives us some kind of a confidence sometimes and then falls into an abyss. So I just think that there could have been, this is what I would ask, the people, this country today, that I've lost so and so. Where is the answer? Dr. Abhinav Pandya has also joined us. He's a terrorism and radicalization expert. Dr. Pandya, thank you so much for making the time. Dr. Pandya, like I said, the disclaimer is, or rather the condition is that I'm not going to politicize it. I'm for the people who've lost, their near and dear ones. I want to ask you, Dr. Pandya, would you say, there are some claims, this is one of the biggest attacks after Pulwama. Is it well orchestrated, coinciding with the visit of J.D. Vance? It's about, in an area which is called mini Switzerland. Apparently, the terrorists were wrecking the entire area. IB was working, RAW was working, had an inkling that there could be some movement there. Maybe we failed in execution, Dr. Pandya. Do you think that could be one of the reasons, sir?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, I think that certainly, I mean, we cannot deny the possibility of a security lapse, and I guess, we should be frank enough to admit it. Okay? Well, as a brief backgrounder, I would like to say that, the Indian state, I mean the Indian state, which includes your diplomats, your politicians, and your intelligence agency. Over the last 75 years, they have failed to understand the Kashmir problem in terms of its ideological roots and in terms of its a very widespread networking. Particularly after the abrogation of Article 370, Pakistan changed its entire strategy of militancy. They improvised it, they innovated it. But we more or less continue to do the same. We could not understand the change strategy. And until recently, I mean, we have a very bad human presence out there. Currently, the presence and the penetration among the people, which leads to good intelligence, that is lacking. No, and I guess I mean here it must be said that certainly there was a lapse on the part of the state.
Right. Before I let you go, Major Bansal, I want to just ask you that, like Dr. Pandya said, that yes, there has been a lapse. I don't want you to agree with him because you've said very clearly that, no, I don't agree with that. But don't you think one of the major problems, Major Bansal, is that how locals get co-opted into this? They could be guides. I'm not blaming my Kashmiri, brothers and sisters, but I'm saying locals, guides, people who do other things, run small outfits. It could have been possible without local help, Major Bansal. Would you agree on that?
Yes, I agree on that. See, there are two things. Once we spoke about the intelligence labs, which I said it's not totally wrong, but I said there have been ignorance on the intelligence. Second, talk about is the local help. No terror attack is possible without the local help, and in this case also locals were involved. So I've been telling time and again that when we are when we have to handle these kind of so-called overground workers and so-called helpers of the terror, we need to take them with an iron fist. It is must. because without the support of locals, see, these terrorists could have not reached this meadow unless they were supported by some of the locals.
Yes.
And without that, it's just not possible. You see other incidents, you see Pulwama, locals were involved, you see Riyasi, you see past incidents in Kathua, even in Kishtwar, wherever the incidents have taken place, locals have been involved.
And also an IB officer dies, you know, my heart goes out.
IB officer died, a naval officer died.
Yeah,
and
I mean, come on. I
some
mean, a
NCA
naval,
Air Force
okay,
died.
but a naval is very unfortunate, extremely sad. But an IB officer? I mean, today we'll sit and think about it, and how can, you know, everyone, anyone who says it's not an intel failure, I think is just having a dream and flying a kite. Not in
No,
the
no, ma'am,
sky, but
you are
elsewhere.
taking it wrong.
I-
You are taking it wrong. See, IB officer was, see, there are a lot of, about 2 to 3,000 people were present in that meadow, out of which there was an IB officer, there was a naval officer, there was an Air Force corporal who died, and there were other people also from different kind of professions.
Dr. Pandya.
So,
Yeah.
yes, Dr. Pandya, you can answer it.
Yeah, don't you think that because of the IB officer, I would think, you know, I kind of fell off my chair because I thought, how did anyone know about that? And it was a group tour.
Well, see, look at the way it was being it was orchestrated. See, it was a tourist place. Generally, militants, when we worked in Kashmir, and I mean, normally anyone who is
Right.
familiar with the militancy terrain in Kashmir would know that generally terrorists would avoid such public places. They would think at least twice before coming to such public, open tourist places. Now, if this thing has happened, certainly they must have had a proper real-time intelligence of that area, and this is something of which about which some
All right.
real known Kashmir hands were giving inputs for a very, very long
All
time.
right.
No.
Okay.
And
And
let me
it's-
tell you,
Huh.
in Kashmir, after the abrogation of Article 370, I'm talking about the general people, among the common masses. This very intense Islamist radical ideology, particularly the presence of the ideological roots of
All
Muslim
right.
Brotherhood and Jamaat-e-Islami, that is spreading. So the local involvement was certainly there. And at a strategic level, I would like to emphasize that government of India,
All
after
right.
the abrogation
Okay.
of Article 370, continued mentioning that development is the Kashmir's problem, but Kashmir's problem is Islamist radicalization. And Pakistan changed its strategy. They created new kind
All
of
right.
terrorist
Okay.
outfits, which looked like local outfits. But
All
what
right.
was our response? Send more tourists, more tourism, more development package. We completely failed to work on the fronts like intelligence collection,
All right.
on the fronts like
Very
liquidation
strong
of
words there.
militants.